A horrific case was uncovered at a Qingjing temple in Yunnan. 13 nuns' bodies were buried in a mass grave. The police gradually uncovered layers of mystery, finding the culprit, while fragmentary statements and traces of blood hidden for many years gradually emerged. The horrifying secret in the darkness of Baiyan Temple was gradually revealed. On July 10, 2008, at around 7 a.m., a group of 4 villagers in Minglan Village, Mudong County, Yunnan Province, China gathered together at the empty lot behind Baiyan Temple to collect firewood and find some dry leaves to cook. This land was located on the edge of a hillside, with few people passing by. When they approached a bumpy area of land, they suddenly smelled a strong stench. At first, no one understood what was happening, only thinking that it might be the carcass of an animal that had died a long time ago. However, the stench was so strong that the group was confused. One of the group suggested going closer to check if it was an animal carcass. After a few minutes of lightly digging the loose soil above, they discovered patches of brown sand. The next second, a blackened, decomposed human arm appeared, terrifying the group. 2 people immediately screamed and ran away, while one person stood frozen in place, his heart pounding, unable to believe his eyes. Realizing that this was a sign of a serious crime, they immediately reported it to the local authorities. Just over an hour later, the police force of Mokdong district was present at the scene. Major Lu Fong, over 40 years old, was experienced in handling many complicated cases. He quickly requested to block off the area, and together with the investigation team, set up a perimeter to prevent people from entering and leaving without permission. Looking at the uneven ground, he realized that this area was quite large, with scattered signs of soil and sand disturbance. He suspected that there was not just one body but possibly a mass grave. As the crime scene investigation team began to dig, each layer of wet soil was removed, the smell of death became stronger. The soldiers quickly put on specialized masks and sprayed disinfectant. From what was revealed, they discovered many similar pieces of cloth, brown in color. At first, some people thought it was the farmer's cloth, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was the nun's outfit. Major Lu Fong talked to an assistant, his eyes shining with tension. He asked to speed up the progress, record, and take detailed photos of each piece of evidence. A police officer mentioned the nearby Bark Van Pagoda. The pagoda was highly respected by the people of Min Lam village. For many years, the abbot here regularly helped the poor, supporting relief rice during the lean season. In the minds of many people, Bark Van Pagoda has always been a peaceful and quiet place. But now, the discovery of a mass grave right behind the pagoda has shocked everyone, raising questions about whether it is related to the pagoda or not. More body parts began to appear as the soil continued to be dug up. The forensic team determined that the body was severely decomposed, indicating that it had been buried a long time ago. The skin and bones mixed with the mud, creating a haunting scene. The investigation team split into 2 groups, one focused on the excavation, the other recorded the situation and collected any remaining items or pieces of cloth. As they expanded the area, they realized that the number of bodies was not limited to just 1 or 2 people. This only reinforced Major Lu Fong's initial concern that this might be a mass grave. The weather turned hot around noon, helping the excavation process to speed up a bit. The police stretched a tarp to shade the area. A subordinate reported that at least 6 bodies had been discovered, all of them female. If the initial suspicions were correct, this was no longer a simple murder but a massacre. Experience told Major Lu Fong that this case was highly complex. Around 2 p.m., the authorities continued to expand the excavation to the west. The stench grew stronger. Many bodies were discovered lying on top of each other, wrapped in old brown cloths. Some bodies still had a little hair left, some only had bones. The forensic staff tried to separate each set of remains to put them in bags. No one dared to talk loudly, just quietly completing the task. Although no one clearly stated their feelings, their eyes showed extreme tension. At around 4 p.m., the excavation work was temporarily stopped to wait for further examination. The investigation team moved the bodies, clothes, and bone fragments to the examination room. At the scene, Major Lu Fong requested that warning signs be put up and 2 soldiers were assigned to guard the area all night. No one was allowed to enter this area without permission. When he finished, he returned to the district police headquarters. That evening, Major Lu Fong called an urgent meeting. The initial list of victims indicated that they were all female, most likely nuns or religious women. However, there have been no reports of missing persons in many years. This raises the question, were these nuns from elsewhere, or were they members of the Bark Van Pagoda? At around 7 a.m. on July 11, 2008, Major Lu Fong and 3 key investigators left the headquarters, heading towards Bak Van Pagoda. They planned to contact the abbot to verify whether there was any record of the nuns disappearing. At the same time, the forensic team began examining the body parts. At exactly 7 a.m., the investigation team's car stopped in front of the gate of Bak Van Pagoda. A few elderly Buddhists passing by were curious, but no one stopped. The surrounding atmosphere was as peaceful as ever. A nun standing near the gate was informed of the presence of the police, then quickly ran inside to report to the abbot. A few minutes later, a middle-aged monk came out, said that the abbot was busy for a few minutes, and asked the investigation team to wait in the guest room. This monk was respectful, answering all questions carefully. He confirmed that Bak Van Pagoda only had a few people living there regularly, while the young nuns usually just came to practice and then left. When asked about any recent unusual events, he said he knew nothing. However, the investigation team knew that this was just the beginning of a case full of mysteries. With no clear breakthrough, Major Lu Fong ordered a group to stay in Min Lam village to inquire about the local people to see if anyone had come to the story of the missing nun before. The remaining 3 got in the car and returned to meet urgently with the group's forensic director, because at this time, identifying this number could be the key. At 10 a.m. on the same day, July 11, 2008, the forensic team reported that so far, a total of 13 female bodies, aged between 20 and 30, had been identified. All were wearing brown cloth or cloth, some of the remaining ones were identified as nuns' robes. Much of this can be severely decomposed. The song with these parts can be decomposed to a lesser extent, proving that the time of death does not completely overlap. This means that these incidents happened sporadically and not at the same time. The mission information was quiet for a few seconds. The 13 female victims were mostly from the religious group, a fact that could not be denied. A young officer hypothesized that the perpetrator could have been continuously and dangerously operating on nuns for many months. If so, was that person related to Bak Van Pagoda or someone from the outside infiltrating? Major Lu Fong did not draw a conclusion but requested a wider investigation. However, all initial signs showed that Bak Van Pagoda was the most suspicious center. After discussion, the fastest control team controlled the accumulated records within a year to see if there were any reports. On the shore, they would send someone to talk to the people around the pagoda, asking about the number of nuns who had appeared and disappeared. That afternoon, they split into 2 groups. One group went to the district office and the temporary residents in a village to research any data related to the missing person. The other group coordinated with local investigators to interview households in Min Lam village, especially those who often passed by the temple. During the visit, a farmer named Trong Min, about 45 years old, said that nearly a year ago, some young nuns invited them to the market to buy vases and vegetables, but then they disappeared. Mr. Trong said he did not suspect anything at the time, because he thought they might have moved elsewhere. A woman selling water next to the temple gate also invited a few faces. She said that they used to go to the shop to drink tea, but around the end of 2007, she did not see them again. However, no one warned them. After listening, the coordinator recorded that they only received information, and could not confirm whether it was related. But the pattern, this series of silent disappearances, coincided with the time when these things could be discovered. At the same time, another investigator approached Mr. Lu Wen, who was in charge of the agricultural warehouse near the temple gate. Mr. Lu was cautious, avoiding specific details. He said he only knew that the temple had many nuns coming and going, and that every few months he saw new people, and every few months someone left. He was not close to them, so he could not remember their names. When asked about strange noises or anything suspicious, Mr. Lu kept shaking his head, saying that he went to bed early, his house was far from the temple, and there was nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, at the commune police station, the missing persons file recorded almost no cases related to nuns. This was understandable, because many nuns did not register for official temporary residence or their families lived far away and did not receive information. The generous abandonment of love affairs has not been clearly proven, but the possibility of suspicion with Bak Van Temple increased. Why did so many nuns suddenly leave without anyone reporting it? This difficulty could happen randomly, at least when it coincided with the time of the mass grave. Major Lu Fong commented that either someone at the temple knew and kept quiet, or these nuns themselves were in a regime without calling for love. On the evening of July 11, 2008, the investigation team gathered at Mokdong headquarters to compile data. They had built a draft diagram, marking the times when nuns disappeared according to the villagers' accounts. About 4 or 5 cases disappeared from March to May 2007, then a few more people sporadically from July to October. It is still not certain whether there are victims in the burial pit or not, but the time overlap is quite close. If they were really harmed, the risk of causing this service could be caused many times, lasting throughout 2007 and finding a way to cover it up. A soldier in the team suggested that the next morning they should return to Bak Van Pagoda, try to talk privately with some young nuns to see if anyone knew anything. Major Lu Fong agreed, coaxing everyone to be smart, avoid making a fuss. Also, if there were suspects in the pagoda, the team would be on guard. They planned to request a search of some areas around the temple, including the warehouse, living room, kitchen and well. For example, for an official investigation, they needed to be clear, unable to break through. On the morning of July 12, 2008, a 4-person investigation team returned to the temple, trying to get through each nun listed in the internal register the day before. Most of the nuns provided their status, answering that they knew nothing about the missing mission. Some confirmed that the temple was still peaceful, had not heard anyone calling for help or had any conflicts. Others just repeated the sentence, "We are just taking action, there is little contact outside." The police felt the tense atmosphere. Many people expressed their hesitation, afraid of trouble. Only one nun in her 30s, whose name was listed in the window as Nok Leon, seemed a bit free when asked for details about the nuns who had gone to the market with her. She only mentioned that there were a few people who had lived in the same room, but then left. When asked when they left, she replied that she did not remember, nor did she know why. This brooding sign made an investigator suspect that she was hiding something. He tried his best, but Nun Nok Leon said that she was not convenient to say much, only that they had asked for permission to stay and then left. She refused to reveal more, citing the reason of having to perform a ceremony. Although there was no concrete evidence, this response was enough to warn people to take notes. On the afternoon of July 12, 2008, the investigation team returned, continuing to wait for the official forensic results. The search warrant was extended to the old rooms, the warehouse, the empty rooms of the nuns. The activity was ready to confirm a state. They used scanners, searchlights, and cameras. In the service area, an investigator discovered a tear in the old door frame, a piece of brown cloth with some Chinese characters, suspected to be the same as the shirt of a certain nun. That same afternoon, around the warehouse wall, they found a small string of worms with beads carved with Sanskrit characters. If it matches the victim's personal map, it further confirms that the victim was still in the temple at the time of the announcement of his departure. Report to Major Lu Fong, all signs such as canvas, fallen worms, and scratches on the door frame are suspected. Although not enough to incriminate, these findings have found mysterious activities within the temple. There are no other holes in the temple, perhaps this has been moved to the back as the original ban. On July 18, 2008, Nun Man Dai confirmed that the piece of cloth could be related to Miss Jo Fap, who had visited the temple in September 2007 and disappeared. The abbot said that she had returned to her hometown. When examining the characters on the rosary, Ms. Man Dai found that it was very similar to the rosary that Jo Fap had used. Another person had also disappeared without explanation. On the morning of July 19, 2008, the director's report identified the blood on the cloth as matching the blood type of a skeleton found in the burial pit. The investigation team suspected that the crime had been secretly committed from 2007 to early 2008, related to Bak Van Pagoda. That evening, when checking the camera footage from the discovery, they discovered the image of a strange nun startled. Her identity was not in the pagoda. On July 20, 2008, she left the pagoda at night. Monk Thong Tin explained that this was a guest. The circumstances were similar to many other cases that had prevented her from disappearing. On the afternoon of July 20, 2008, while checking old documents, the investigation team discovered a missing person report from September 2007 in another district. The victim was said to have visited Bak Van Pagoda. They marked this as an important relationship. On July 21, 2008, Li Zhe, a villager next door, revealed that in May 2007, he found a person in brown clothes dragging a woman into room C behind the temple. She struggled but was released from the regime. He did not report it early for fear of being implicated. This testimony coincided with the time when many nuns went missing. From July 17 to 20, 2008, the investigation team collected a number of samples suspected to be related to the victims, including Gmail cloth, beads engraved with Sanskrit characters, and witness statements outside the jar. All pointed to the hypothesis that the series of disappearances had occurred since 2007. On the morning of July 21, 2008, the director team reported that the torn cloth had bone samples that matched the bones of the victims. Major Lu Feng decided to speed up the adjustment. He ordered one group to continue monitoring Bak Van Pagoda, while another group expanded interviews with nearby residents to clarify the movements of the nuns who had visited. They wanted to find a witness who had seen something surprising. At 8 a.m. the same day, two officers approached a woman named Kwak Lan, the owner of a breakfast shop 500 meters east of the pagoda. Ms. Kwak Lan said that in the summer of 2007, there were some nuns who often bought porridge. Once, she saw that they had pockmarks on their wrists but did not ask further questions. When the police asked her more, she remembered that there was a nun with two other people, looking bewildered as if she was afraid someone was following her. After that time, she did not see them again. The same day, the investigation team went to a small grocery store that specialized in providing office products and daily necessities for Bak Van Pagoda. The owner, Mr. Dang, said that in 2007, he had sold quite a few personal items to young nuns. A nun once asked to buy a used cell phone but did not have enough money. After more than a week, she did not appear again. Late in the afternoon of July 21, 2008, a man named La Shine came to report that he had heard two nuns arguing by the stream near Bak Van Stream in late 2007. One seemed to want to leave, but the other advised her to discuss it with someone before being punished. He did not pay attention, thinking it was an internal matter. On July 22, 2008, the surveillance force reported that the night ban in the temple showed no signs of unusual entry or exit. However, around 10 p.m., a surveillance force saw the lights gradually turn on in the old warehouse and then turn off very quickly. When they checked again, they did not find anything new. The investigation team decided to continue monitoring the owner's room for evidence. On July 23, 2008, the interrogation of key members began at the company headquarters in Mokdong district. The abbot of Bak Van Pagoda came by invitation, bringing a middle-aged monk to assist in testifying. When asked about the missing nuns, the abbot only gave a general answer that they left due to fate, without providing a specific list. Regarding the piece of cloth with blood stains, he said he did not know, maybe someone had dropped it despite the danger. Meanwhile, another investigation team questioned nuns Nok Lian and Jio Chan. Both admitted that the pagoda had welcomed many nuns for temporary practice in 2007 but could not remember the details. When asked about the nun who wanted to buy a phone, Nok Lian did not know, and Jio Chan only heard about it briefly. On July 24, 2008, the investigation team retrieved the list of suspected missing nuns. They discovered 3 cases that had definitely visited Bak Van Pagoda in 2007 but did not return home. A woman called her brother in July 2007, saying that the situation in the temple was not good and that she wanted to leave. That was her last call. On July 25, 2008, a specialist in Sanskrit inscriptions found a DNA match with one of the bodies in the burial tank. This reinforced the evidence that the person had been in the temple. In the afternoon of the same day, Major Lu Feng directed the planning of searching for hidden rooms or areas that had been locked for a long time in the temple. They suspected that there was still a diagram of the character. However, to explore scientifically, they needed a clear order. From the superior, the investigation team wrote a list of all the evidence: 13 bodies, brown Gmail coffee, the victim's chain of worms. The testimony of many people about the missing services for unknown reasons made them hypothesize that the perpetrator was someone who had the conditions to stay in the temple for a long time, had the power to control or threaten the people. On July 26, 2008, the functional capacity was allowed to expand the investigation activities. They returned to Bak Van Temple early in the morning. This time, the abbot welcomed them with the same appearance as usual. When he saw the order, he did not object, and instructed the investigation team to go with 2 monks to conveniently open the areas. They started from the food storage room, then checked a row of old rooms with few people passing by. In the attic, they found a locked wooden chest, covered in dust. When asked, the abbot said it was an old item that was not used. The technical team broke the lock. Inside were some miscellaneous items, a few classic books and a brown robe cut short, Gmail purple color suspected to be dried blood. Construction presented that they did not know the origin of the robe. The alert sealed it and took it for examination. When answering the adjacent rooms, an alert discovered a shaky wooden floor. There was a hole under the plank. Inside was a small cloth bag containing some personal items, a piece of comb, a piece of paper with some handwritten notes, and a bag to protect the chain. The alert recognized the writing quickly up to 2 words, home, and escape, but the specific content may be blurred. It was clear that this was not a map of the stream for individuals to hide. More evidence that someone was restrained, trying to escape but failed. By 4 p.m., the search was over. The investigation team kept the brown robe suspected of being bloody, the personal belongings hidden under the floor, and the old wooden chest. During the search, the state of the pillar and the 2 monks remained calm and did not react harshly. They only kept saying they did not know who put those things there. Right after leaving the temple, Major Lu Fong held an urgent meeting and assigned the task to the technical team to conduct an urgent test. If the blood sample on the robe matched the character, suspicion would be stronger. On July 27, 2008, Nun Man Dai secretly called the investigation team, reporting that last night someone in the temple asked her about her encounter with the police. She did not know who had revealed it, but she felt scared and warned to find out the truth soon. Major Lu Fong reminded them to use private conversation mode and to contact him via a secret phone number if necessary. This showed that someone in the temple wanted to find out which nuns or monks had contact with the police. On the day, the director decided to announce a part of the results. The dark color on the brown robe in the wood and the chest was human blood. The blood type matched a bone sample taken from the ceramic tank. Thus, this object was almost proven that the room applied was directly related to the victim. Who kept it? Who let the robe lie for a long time without anyone claiming it? The abbot was invited to work that afternoon. He continued to deny knowing about the robe and could not explain its origin. The middle-aged monk who accompanied him also did not answer clearly, citing the reason, old things are left lying around. On July 27, the rapid investigation team connected all the data. Many victims in 2007, the body was washed behind, the tools found in the warehouse and the old room, the witness's statement about seeing the act of coercion, hearing the sound of shouting, the piece of paper with the words, escape, optimal. All were found in the temple where the murderer was. However, who was the perpetrator has not yet been determined. On the morning of July 28, an additional questioning was arranged to confirm the plan. The abbot, monk Thong Tin, nun Nok Lian, nun Man Dai and some others were called up once. Man Dai was not ready to operate. She confirmed that she had seen a similar torn brown robe during a cleaning of the application room, but the abbot asked her not to touch it. She did not know why. This information is consistent with the abbot's testimony when he affirmed that he had never known about that robe. Nun Nok Lian, in the interrogation that morning, admitted that she had suspected that someone was standing in front of the regime in the old room but was afraid that speaking out would result in disciplinary action. She confirmed that she had heard begging at night but did not know who because it was locked. When she asked the abbot, he replied that it was someone outside the temple. Nok Lian's testimony reinforced the determination that the cyber mission took place right in the temple. The investigation team was very skilled. However, it is not possible to accuse the pillar yet, but he himself cannot be invincible with all these unusual details. On the afternoon of July 28, the work added a bathtub. A member of the technical team checked the camera recording the exploration process, and noticed the moments of solving the pillar at the door of the application room comfortably, simply looked at the wooden chest and quickly moved to another place. The investigation team determined that this was a suspicious reaction, showing that he knew that the wooden chest contained an undisclosed object. This was an interruption. However, to officially declare the force, they needed to have clearer evidence of the same chain of him. On the morning of July 29, the investigation team continued to monitor the Bark Van Pagoda. A device detected that the monk Thong Tin left the room at more than 5 a.m., carrying a bag of luggage and walking towards the back gate. Seeing the default guard, he turned back. The investigation team immediately arranged for more people behind the stream, in case he escaped. At 7 a.m., Major Lu Fong sent 2 people to meet Thong Tin to ask about his intention to go out. He said he was just going to buy things. They warned him not to leave the area. Thong Tin was silent in his private room. The warning grew more suspicious. At the same time, at the district police station, the director's new results were confirmed. The brown shirt in the wood contained the DNA of the victim Tin Xuan, who had gone missing in mid-2007. The report was immediately sent to Major Lu Fong. This was evidence that the victim was actually murdered at the temple. The summons to the head of the temple and Thong Tin were prepared. This time, they could not deny it. Some people involved, such as Nun Man Dai, Nun Nok Lian and Mun Huan Fap, were still in the area, ready to act. In addition, those who were weak-minded or did not have a firm grasp of the situation had left the temple at the request of the authorities and were arranged for temporary safe accommodation. Thereby, the police determined that they needed to exploit more information from some potential witnesses who had not had the opportunity to interview him before. At 9 a.m., an investigation team went to the medical station to meet Ms. Tru Xuan, who used to occasionally check the nun's health. She said that a year ago, an unknown young nun came to check on the bruise on her hand. When asked about the cause, she said that she had been hit by a work accident, but her worried attitude made her suspicious. At that time, she only prescribed ointment and sent her home without thinking much about it. Now hearing about the mission, she had a hunch that it could be a sign of violent behavior. The control team copied the information but could not add any connections that could be dangerous. On August 7, 2008, a man named Ma Qian appeared and asked to see Major Lu Fong. He said that in September 2007, when he sold firewood to Bark Van and delivered the goods at night, he saw a flash of electric light in the backyard. When he looked curiously, he found an elderly person next to a nun lying on the ground. For fear of being implicated, he remained silent. Everything happened in just a few seconds, but left a strong impression. When he heard about the mass grave, he suspected that he had witnessed the perpetrator resisting the victim. It was dark at that time, he could only respond to a gentle, relaxed person with quite grey hair. The shadow that passed by reminded him of the monk Thong Tin or the abbot. At about 2 p.m. the same day, the police compared Ma Qian Tru's description with the characteristics of the abbot and Thong Tin. Both were over 45 years old, had more or less grey hair, were not too tall, and were thin. This common characteristic made it difficult to determine exactly who had called the nun to the backyard. However, it reinforced the hypothesis that one of the two was temporarily involved, and did not even rule out the possibility that both were involved. On the evening of August 7, 2008, the abbot interrogation took place for the fourth time in a week. This time, the investigator showed the entire chain of images, physical evidence, and summarized some of the evidence. The abbot looked through it and only briefly said that someone had benefited from the crime. When questioned about the tight control of the relaxation section, he avoided it, saying that the stream was wide and it was impossible to know every corner. The investigation team continued to focus on the detail of the brown shirts stored in a locked wooden chest. The abbot did not answer in detail, but only said that many people had the key, not just him. The surrounding events created a tense atmosphere. In addition, the monk Thong Tin was also examined for the third time that day. He was a person who took revenge on the murderer and blamed the abbot, saying that he was only in charge of the warehouse and could not interfere in the internal affairs of the nuns. When asked about the scratches that appeared on his body during the night, he explained that he went to check the garden and was scratched by a thorn. When asked about the nun who had entered the room, he said that he did not witness it, he had only heard it. All answers were dismissive. The control team maintained a customer attitude, not lacking in confidence or denial, because there was no clear evidence that he was the only one who did his actions. On the morning of August 8, 2008, the results of the hair samples and fingernail prints on the cloth still did not provide enough clues to conclude who had enjoyed the victims. These old samples were destroyed. However, the forensic report emphasized that the victims were all sexually assaulted before death. In addition, there may be traces of regurgitation, bone breaking, indicating prolonged violence. This detail is particularly dangerous, reinforcing the speculation that the perpetrator has a tendency to be pathological, dangerous to the group of vulnerable nuns. At 10 a.m., Nun Man Dai returned to assist in identifying some personal items from the comfort room. She recognized the wooden comb of a nun named Jiao Van, who had gone missing in late 2007. She affirmed that Jiao Van had once had the mind to leave the temple because she felt insecure. However, when she disappeared, the abbot announced that Jiao Van had returned to her hometown. Man Dai had suspected but did not react. Now, when she found her wooden comb lying among the blood, she was sure that Jiao Van had become the victim. Less than an hour later, Nun Nok Lian added that she had seen Jiao Van being called to the abbot's room at night. When she returned to her room, her face was glass, her hands and feet were dizzy. Later, Jiao Van disappeared. Nok Lian did not ask much because she was afraid of being implicated. This story created a growing suspicion of the abbot. However, the problem was that no one had caught him exactly. At that time, monk Thong Tin was no longer responsible for becoming the abbot, and he himself used the excuse of only taking care of warehouse work to avoid being caught. On August 9, 2008, Major Lu Fong met with some investigators, proposing countermeasures against the deadlock. He requested to analyze the abbot and Thong Tin into two different areas of assessment, and at the same time change investigators to use the cross-statement tactic, forcing them to confront indirectly through public questions. The goal was to make him not respond to the most dramatic text, thereby revealing the details. In the afternoon of the same day, the investigation team brought Nun Man Dai and Huan Phap to simulate in detail the place where they had seen or heard the love cry. All data was recorded, meticulously drawn diagrams for use in the next material session. By the evening of August 9, the dialogue began. Secrecy facilitates productivity. Sometimes, this method helps detect words that accidentally reveal the truth. The plan was approved. They set up the situation, informed both of them that this would be the last material session, then temporarily withdrew the investigator to let the two sides talk alone for a few minutes, hoping that they believed that no one was watching. In the evening of the same day, arranged the forum in the security room. Through the screen, adjusted the cycle of the pillar and Thong Tin. Initially, both were silent, then the champion pillar hooked Thong Tin. "Why don't you have any sound?" Thong Tin replied, "I can't take the blame for you." The two sides exchanged words, mentioning that they had already disposed of the evidence but dragged them into the warehouse, saying that it was not their intention. Each sentence contained unfavorable content. The warning to sit outside and take careful notes. Although it was not a clear confession, it was enough to reveal the general plot. The truth was clear: the abbot played the role of the bushmaster, directly calling the victim, while Thong Tin invited support to monitor or dispose of the evidence. That meant he knew everything. At that moment, the investigation team immediately entered, recording the entire debate. Fighting for the pillar, fixing the error of the information device. Information was silent, unresponsive, but everything was recorded and recorded. The investigation team made a report, collecting statements as evidence of the accusation. From here, the roles of the two people were almost clearly classified. The abbot was the leader of the plan, and Thong Tin was a co-supporter. On the morning of August 12, 2008, the process of taking the testimony continued to be shared on the forum. Gu Ji still tried to challenge, but when the investigator played the recording of the conversation the night before, he could not deny that he had personally entered the secret place. The investigation team also presented objects, reports, and a list of missing patients. His peace of mind disappeared in an instant. The abbot was slow, and Tong Jing, sitting in the next room, was also confused when he heard his own voice mentioning the disposal of evidence. In the end, under pressure, both agreed to confess part of the truth, but still kept many details undisclosed. After many hours of intense interrogation, on the night of August 12, 2008, the last pillar had to admit everything. Before that, he just sat still, facing Tuing, refusing to answer any questions. The investigation team applied all professional methods, presenting a series of irrefutable evidence: DNA samples from blood stains on the brown shirt, witness statements that he had seen him dragging the victim to the backyard. Each small link formed a complete picture, forcing him to avoid it. Around midnight, he slowly turned to the investigator. "The carpentry shop. I will tell you everything. But don't think I'm a devil. From the beginning, it was all about finishing. I had no other choice." He paused for a moment as if to regain his composure. No one interrupted. The log was ready, the tape recorder was also turned on. He began with an explanation before going into the details of the crime. In 2007, the temple encountered financial difficulties, and fewer people came to study. As the head, he had to take care of everything. During that time, a number of young nuns appeared, hoping to take refuge in the Buddha's door. At first, they were accepted. But then, from some point, he increased his desire. "I knew I was wrong, but I couldn't control myself." This statement confirmed his original motive. The wavering in his thoughts led to abusive behavior. In a private environment, with few people reporting, the wrongdoings continued to escalate. When the victims were stubborn, they would leave or report to the authorities, and he feared his reputation would be ruined. So, from being a person of interest, he spread the word to his staff. The first few nuns were abused in early 2007, and then they escaped. He said, "I tried every way to keep them, reassuring them that no one would believe them. But when someone insisted on leaving the temple, he was forced to act." His voice was calculating as he recounted his first crime. In March 2007, a woman in her 20s was about to leave. He waited until dusk, calling her to the back storage room under the pretext of getting more blankets and mattresses. There, he suddenly prepared the victim's neck, using his power to pin her down. She struggled but could not escape.
13 thi thể Nico trần truồng ở hố
In
chôn
the
tập thể.
chaos, he accidentally did it. But the final result was the opposite. This was not an accidental act, but a deliberate murder in a plan. After the victim died, he took her to the backyard, waited until nightfall, then quietly dug a hole to temporarily bury her. At first, it was simply to cover up the body, but when he realized that no one suspected, he continued to repeat the action. Every time a nun resisted, he used the same method. "I thought about letting them go, but the fear of being discovered was too great." The investigator asked if he had prepared in advance. He shook his head, saying that he usually only used his bare hands. How many times had he covered the victims' mouths with wet towels to stop them from screaming? When the victim stopped moving, he would wrap this old brown shirt in it, and wait until late at night to bury it in the temple's backyard. This part of the temple was rarely visited, and he was the abbot, so he could move around without suspicion. Most of these can be buried together in a big hole. I think that after being purified many times, they will be easily discovered. With each new victim, he would widen the hole, cover it with a layer of soil and dry grass to hide it. At this point, the listeners were not frightened. But he still spoke evenly, as if it was the only way to protect his reputation. In his story, he kept repeating, "I didn't mean it from the beginning." However, the action was repetitive, even escalating. He did not just kill 1 or 2 people, but a total of 13. When asked if he felt remorse, he smiled bitterly. "I hate, but only because I did not have enough knowledge to stop, not because of what I did." True to the severity of the crime, on August 13, 2008, the investigation team analyzed the statements of the 2 suspects and found that they were at the pillars approaching the victims, and Thong Tin was the last supporter. The initial motive could have been to use Gi to confirm, but then, because of fear of being reported, he killed. Many other victims also suffered similar ends throughout 2007. This discussion is consistent with the signs of violence and abuse verified by forensics. They plan to dig deeper into other tasks to avoid holding the pillar entirely responsible for the accident. On the afternoon of August 13, 2008, a nun who had left the temple for a long time named Than Phuc came to the interface, saying that at the end of October 2007, she had heard Gio Van more worried about the abbot's sexual harassment. He was the most powerful person in the temple. This coincided with Man Dai's testimony about Gio Van wanting to leave. Than Phuc added that she had also vaguely heard the abbot threaten, "Once you come here, you cannot leave on your own, otherwise there will be consequences." According to the story, the abbot always maintained a gentle facade while secretly abusing some nuns. All of this information was consistent with the evidence accumulated from the beginning of the service. On August 14, 2008, the police stationed at the post advanced to the area behind the pagoda to conduct a crime scene investigation. He appeared to be weakened but not completely redundant. When standing in front of the hole, he only said, "Everything was an accident." The investigation team asked him to specify the location of each victim buried, but he avoided it, saying he could not remember. In the distance, the monk Thong Tin, who was isolated, was also brought in to determine the burial place. He pointed out quite accurately the locations of the excavations, affirming that the post was the one who decided everything. All forums were recorded as a legal basis. On August 14, 2008, Major Lu Fong and the Specialized Department concluded that there was no reason to delay Toi Min. The evidence was too clear. The post was the next threat or was following Thong Tin's orders. Although both argued, the main fault still belonged to the authorities. Based on a series of statements, they planned to close the case as soon as possible, proposed to handle the serial killer with the abbot, along with the accompanying charges against Thong Tin. The authorities also consider his active role as an accomplice. On August 15, 2008, the final interrogation of the forum post took place. Initially, he kept silent, but when you can put the version to read the names of each victim, detail the date they were lost, the evidence matches the time he had no alibi, he finally had to start confessing. Although he did not describe the entire set of actions, he admitted to being involved in the deaths of many people. When asked about his motives, he evaded, saying that he only wanted to keep the nuns to serve the temple, but they disobeyed orders, so there was a fight. Everyone understood that this was a fallacy. However, this was still considered an intermittent confession. On the afternoon of August 15, 2008, the leader of Mokdong District Police signed the investigation conclusion report, requesting Kian to sue the serial killer of the Pillar's opponents, the accomplice in the murder of the monk Thong Tin. The number of victims was determined to be 13 people, who died between 2007 and early 2008. Most of the bodies were buried in the pond behind the temple. The acts of abuse took place before the murder. The case was very clear. The treatment documents were hundreds of pages thick, detailing the process of taking statements, proving, evidence and appraisal results. On August 16, 2008, the Pillar was returned to detention, waiting for the judicial agency to complete the procedures. The information was also temporarily detained. The level of the tools may be decided to handle the process. However, the internal investigation is certain that the Pillars face the death penalty. The crime is too dangerous, causing the death of 13 people, along with the act of violating and concealing the system. The information is capable of withstanding the severity level, optional parameters. August 17, 2008, the investigation team finalized the content and transferred the entire task file to the superiors. The Bark van case has lasted for many weeks since the discovery of the mass grave on July 10, 2008. The evidence collected is complete. The forensic director determined that all 13 victims were murdered and had been harmed. Evidence products such as Gmail brown shirts, deep carvings of Sanskrit characters, wooden marks and knife marks, all match the testimony of the Pillars and the substance used to commit the crime. On August 23, 2008, the superiors confirmed the verdict. The executioner was sentenced to death due to the large number of victims and the barbaric nature of the dangerous act. Monk Thong Tin was sentenced to life in prison for helping health and concealing the crime. The families of the victims, after being informed, also agreed with this decisive verdict. On August 24, 2008, the con artist was led to the execution site. He was no longer calm as before and could not report. The last sentence quoted from the minutes was only, "I am angry." That was a short sentence, without legal meaning, because the crime of killing 13 people still cannot be healthy. The authorities immediately carried out the execution procedure. The sentence was carried out in accordance with the procedure. That same afternoon, internal information confirmed that the execution had been carried out. Monk Thong Tin was given long-term protection, ending all disputes. Mokdong District Police collected the files, copied all the documents to store in the project warehouse. Bark Van Pagoda was also fenced off, waiting for the final decision from the authorities. The case ended, but the aftershocks are still heavy. Thank you for taking the time to watch the entire video on the Phantom Skip channel. If you find the video useful, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next content. See you in the upcoming videos.